Awesome. So we are live, apparently. Let's see if this loads. All right. I think we're live. Awesome.
I
Hey,
think we
everyone.
are. Hello.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. I'm a composer who writes for music for book adaptations for film, television, and gaming. And today is a very special day, a very special morning here on the channel, and afternoon for John here. It's the inaugural live stream. I've never done one of these on the channel, so it's kind of been a fun experiment, kind of figuring out how all this works. And I'm so grateful to John from Disquiet and Dragons for joining me on this inaugural quest to talk a little Stephen King and specifically Cujo. John is Disquiet Dragons is a fantastic channel. I linked him down below in the description, so definitely check it out. He has some fantastic book haul videos, all sorts of different tags that he has as well. And I love the way he kind of explains his thought process, behind reading some of these books. And I love also, he lives in some of the most beautiful, English countryside. And how he shows some of that in his videos as well. So it's a pleasure to have you here, John. Thank you so much for being on the channel. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me onto your channel. Looking forward to talking about some Cujo and Stephen King and what we thought of the book.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great because, for all those, who don't know John and don't know my channel, we connected through our shared love of Stephen King. And so we decided to, we started talking on Discord, and we thought it would be really cool to do a buddy read of some books this year. And, that was the impetus, I think, for both of us starting our channels was to have more people to talk about books with. Because, it's like, in the regular world, people don't take necessarily reading as seriously as we might, and so it's nice to have a community that's so loving and supportive, and to find cool friends to read books with. So that was the
absolutely
thing. And maybe you could tell the audience also, John, what made you decide to start the channel and kind of what your journey was to getting here.
Oh, sure. I started my channel about mid-March. I've been thinking about it for a while. Like many other booktubers, it was just to talk about books, to try and make a community with like-minded people that I can share my love of reading and talk about books with. Another reason is I do suffer from anxiety a bit, and I thought it really helped me by putting myself out there, trying to get a bit more comfortable with it and see if it helped my anxiety. And it's done wonders for me. I think I've come out of my shell a little bit since I've started. And Booktube, it's been nothing but good. It's done nothing but good for me. Met some wonderful people, found some wonderful new books that I may never have found otherwise. And the Booktube community, I haven't got the words to say how much I enjoy it. Everyone's so kind and so friendly, and it's just a brilliant place to be. So yeah, being on Booktube, best thing I've done in a while. Scariest thing I've done in a while, but the best thing I've done in a while.
I'm so happy to hear that, John. I feel the same way, actually. It's like, as a composer, so much of my work is tied to music and also sharing that. And I always felt like I had a love-hate relationship with social media. And I also had a lot of anxiety, tied to putting myself on camera and doing this kind of stuff. So
yeah,
I decided to try to quell that anxiety by starting a different channel. And so I could do two channels at once, because what could go wrong there? And
and
I think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think for people of a certain age group, I mean, I know like youngsters, they grow up with putting themselves on a screen. It's no big deal. For me, I was like, I really had to try and build myself up to it and like try and build my confidence to the point where I could sit in front of a camera and just talk to it. And it 100%. Felt so awkward at first, but it kind of comes natural after a bit. I don't know if you feel the same.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's like, as you said, it's the repetition thing. It's like, as one starts to do it, you kind of get more comfortable. You can relax and let your instincts take over rather than kind of thinking about everything you're going to say. Or I think those
Yeah,
things are really, really helpful. So
yeah. It's very easy to overthink things, isn't it?
100%, 100%.
Yeah,
As you're doing many videos on these types of channels, it's like you kind of start to weed out that overthinking, and it naturally starts to flow, I think, a little bit better. So
yeah. I
um
think so.
totally, totally. So yeah, I would also love to know, kind of, now as we're kind of pivoting to Stephen King related stuff and Cujo, what was the first book you read of Stephen King's, and what got you into reading Stephen King?
When I was I always loved horror type things, even from an early age. It's like, Scooby Doo and drawing
Yeah.
vampires at school and all that kind of stuff. And so I grew up, loved horror, loved werewolves, all that kind of thing. And when I got to about 16, 17 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I got my first job and I started earning a little bit of money. And I was I went shopping one day and I've always enjoyed books and reading, but I never really read much horror.
Mm.
Anyway, I was in the bookshop and I saw this sparkly paperback and I was like, what's that? And it was Stephen King, Nightmares and Dreamscapes. And it's a chonker to start with. It's about 800 pages.
Yeah.
But I bought that and I just read it in a weekend.
Wow.
And that was it. Absolutely hooked from there. I got The Stand, read
Mm-hmm.
that in 3 days. Absolutely loved that book. And then the book that we read as a buddy read, my nan actually bought it me as a Christmas present. So this edition here is about 28 years old, and it was a
Wow,
Christmas present
nice.
from my nan. If she knew what was inside it, I doubt she'd have bought it me.
Right? Yeah.
But yeah, I started off with these short stories, moved on to The Stand. I think the third book I read of his was Needful Things, and to this day, that's my absolute favorite by him. Might be a bit controversial, but it's my
I love it.
favorite.
My sister's reading
Yeah,
it. She's raving about it. And she's just getting into Stephen King. I think her first book she read was Pet Cemetery, then 11/22/63. Now she's on to Needful Things, and she
yeah.
absolutely, yeah, it's an underrated classic for sure.
Oh, yeah. It's surprisingly dark as well. Some of the things that people get up to in that book, they're not good.
It starts off very, I think this is one thing Stephen King does really well, and I feel the same actually about Cujo. Was it There's certain things that he plants seeds of, and it starts off as innocuous. You kind of think of like, where's this going? You kind of don't really
Yeah,
about it, and then it just starts to balloon into this chaotic mess.
yeah. He does that so well, though. He he plants seeds, and you might not even notice them when you read it, but then like 50 pages on, you'll go, oh, and you'll think back to that one chapter. It's just so clever. The guy's a genius.
Oh
Simple as
yeah,
that.
and the fact that he doesn't outline his stuff when he writes, is just blows my mind. You think about somebody at the opposite end of the spectrum who's a fantastic writer, obviously, is Brandon Sanderson, who outlines everything
Yeah,
meticulously in
meticulous.
advance. and
Yeah,
and that's a particular type of writing style. Stephen King is much more off the cuff, and I kind of like it. I like that you don't know where it's going to go, and I also feel like sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't, but I kind of appreciate the messiness of that too. um
yeah,
I felt like there's certain books where the beginning is incredible, the story concept, maybe the ending, some people have contentions about it, or some people love it, they think it's brilliant, some people don't like it at all, the ending. But I kind of I like the off the cuff way that Stephen King
yeah,
does it. But at the same time, kind of, if one thinks of Cujo as the perfect example of this, he almost sets everything up like a stage play. It's like the characters enter the scene, they exit the page. It's like there's a feeling of like the chess pieces are being set up for this particular climax or something.
yeah. And
Um,
what I loved about that book was, even though it's set in quite a small area, and you've got characters that aren't even main characters. They maybe take up 2 pages in the entire book, but they feel so alive. They feel so human and so real. How he can make even the smallest character feel so important in that book is just fantastic. The way he world building in CUJO is just unreal, because it feels so real. I don't know about you, but while I was reading it, you almost feel like a resident in Castle Rock, because everything is just like, you can feel the heat of the summer day, and you can almost feel how lazy the town gets in the afternoon, and it's just so good. You're gonna hear that from me a lot today. It's so good.
Yeah, exactly. No, same. I mean, I was so surprised and impressed, especially when you think of the background in the way this book came to pass. Like, Stephen King talks about famously that he was on, you know, so many drugs, and he was drinking so much at the time that he doesn't even remember writing CUJO. You know, so it's kind of crazy to think about that. Like, a brilliant book could come from the mind of, you know, somebody who always says like, oh, I don't even remember writing that. It's just kind of
and
crazy.
you're saying that the idea of it actually came from a personal experience that he had. In 1977, he was riding his motorcycle, and it started to like splutter, and he had like a bit of engine failure. Anyway, he managed to coax his motorcycle to this garage in the middle of nowhere or something. And he pulls up, and he's talking to the mechanic, and out of the garage out emerges this St. Bernard and starts growling at Stephen King. The St. Bernard comes up, tries to bite Stephen King, like goes through his hand, and the mechanic hits the St. Bernard on the back end, like on its backside, with a wrench to like stop it. So that's where he actually got the idea for CUJO. And there was also a newspaper article, and a young child was killed by a St. Bernard in Portland, Maine. So that kind of sowed the seeds as well. But I was so surprised when I found out that, you know, because in the book, there's a similar scene to that. So that was writing from like actual experience, which I think is so cool. He probably doesn't remember it though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, he probably remembers the impetus of how it happened, but he probably doesn't remember the actual writing process, which kind of blows me mind. And, you know, for everyone who's tuning in, we're going to keep this spoiler free, at least on the outset of it. And kind of as we get deeper into the discussion, I'll let you know, or we'll let you know when we're going to get into any spoilers. So if you haven't read it yet, then you can kind of mute it or something, and we'll let you know when it's ready to go back to spoiler free. But in the meantime, you know, we'll be spoiler free here. But yeah, to your point, John, I think one thing that was very interesting is it is such a small area. You know, it's like a couple of blocks, really, a couple square miles. I think we were talking about earlier and it's a very rural area. And you see the juxtaposition, because the Trenton family, they moved from, I think, New York City to this place. And so, you know, you feel their adjustment as well, from the big city to this rural area, and their world has shrunk. But because it's shrunk, you get an expanded view of such a small area, if that makes sense, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it. So it's like everything counts. The mailbox on the corner of the street, that counts. You know, it's like the thing you never think about. It's zoomed into a perspective that's like these few people, these couple houses. What a brilliant way to, you know, to world.
And they've come from a place where there's probably 10 restaurants on every street, and they've moved to this little town where like the social hub is this like deadbeat bar or a diner. And I mean, that must be so difficult. Well, I think Vic, the main character, he wanted it, but his wife didn't. It must have been so difficult for her to go from living in this big city down to this where she can't even buy a pair of shoes, probably. And
100%.
I
You
mean,
feel
don't get me wrong, I'd love to live in a little town like that. I think that'd be great. But
the older I get, the more when I was younger, I definitely liked the big city feel. And the older I've gotten, the more I've appreciated living out in the, country, or in the woods or something would be
yeah,
fantastic. And it really
and
portrays well in this book. And I thought about also how, like you were saying, Donna Trenton, the wife, is hesitant to move to a smaller area. And it's almost like that sows the seeds for certain things that happen later on in the book. But it's like, it's also really and I love that Stephen King does this in books like this. It's like, yes, it's about a rabid dog, that's like on the front cover, really, you could tell.
yeah,
um and but it's so much a meditation on marriage and the messiness of marriage, and like marriage dynamics and things like that, and he does that so well.
yeah,
um
and it's not only with Vic and Donna either. It's
mhm,
also with Joe and Charity, the owners of Cujo. I
mhm,
think it's a completely different dynamic in their relationship because Vic and Donna is very loving and trusting,
mhm.
especially from Vic's side of it. But it's the complete opposite with Joe and Charity. That's really quite a toxic relationship. And I think the juxtaposition of the two, because they are the two families, the main character families, aren't they?
Mhm.
And they're so different to each other. Like there's the one family and they're quite well to do, and the other family, they're really struggling. And I also think that another theme they explore so well is like luck and circumstance. And I was thinking about it before.
Mm.
It amazes me that the best part of the luckiest day of Charity's life, without going into spoilers, is the seed that starts everything that turns into Donna's worst possible day.
Yeah.
Because that one piece of luck that Charity has, if that didn't happen, none of the other events would happen.
True. Yeah.
Because
Well,
that is, it's the one thing that starts off the events that mean that Donna is in the situation she ends up in towards the end of the book. It's I'm trying really hard not to spoil anything.
it's hard to talk
But
about books like this without spoiling, because it's there's so many different things to explore.
yeah, there's so many levels, and I mean, it was actually a reread for me because I read it probably in the mid 90s.
Hmm.
Um, I was like late teens when I read it, so I remember it being excellent. But I read it as a straight up animal attack book.
Mm.
But I I took in it's a lot more new. You can read it as that and enjoy it as that, and you'll have a good time. If all you want to do is read about a dog with rabies attacking people, it fill your boots. It
Yeah.
will do the trick. But as I when I read it being older, you can see the nuance in the book and the different themes, and it's such a clever novel.
Yeah.
It just explores so many different things. Like you said about how it describes marriage so well and relationships. And the main theme I picked up on is it's such a fantastic examination of fear, the fears that we have, and ranging from being a little child and you're scared of the monster in the closet, all
Yeah.
the way up to like real existential fears where am I going to die alone? Am I too old? Will I die lonely? Will my child be a good person? And it's it's just phenomenal how he makes all these people's fears, no matter how trivial they may seem at the time, but they all
Hmm.
seem so real and so valid. And it's it's just he's got such a way with words. He's he is just a master of making you feel the emotions that he wants his characters to feel, and you feel every emotion that those characters feel in the book. You feel like when you read it, it's not really a spoiler because it's very early on, when Tad, Vic and Donna's son, is scared of a monster in the closet. And it just took me back to when I was a kid. I'm like, oh yeah, like I'd turn off the bedroom light and then I'd run to the bed and get into the bed and cover up quick, because you are scared of what's under the bed.
Right.
And the way he can take you back, and he makes his characters feel things that you might have felt in your own life. So that kind of makes you feel and empathize with his characters even more. Like when Donna moved to the smaller town and she's scared of being lonely, I really felt for her when she was going through that, because I've had to move to new places before in my life, and it's difficult. And as you grow older, it is more difficult trying to fit into places. So you absolutely feel the things that all these characters are going through, and it's just the way that. Oh, go on. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I think that's an excellent point, John. Like, I think the one thing that makes Stephen King's books more than just quote unquote a typical horror book is it, even if there's a supernatural element, or even if there's a larger than life kind of evil entity, kind of a horror aspect to a book, so much of it is the things that people do to each other or for each other, and that human dynamic juxtapositioned against this horror is, I think, what gives it way more nuance and depth. I think if it was just a rabid dog, attacking people, it would be a specific type of horror story. But the reason why this is so much bigger is, it explores all the emotions that we all feel at different stages of our life. The kids' fears, the wife's fears, the husband's fears. It's like every single person's fears is explored, and it's a good cross section of a lot of people's different types of fears, rational or irrational as they may be.
And not only people either. Like even Cujo, he explores the fears of Cujo, because all Cujo is, his fear is that he's not a good dog.
Right.
And even though, he writes it's quite basic how he did, but it's like dogs don't I love dogs to bits and they're smart and everything, but I don't think their thought is as nuanced as they're like, oh, food, eat it.
Right.
But it was heartbreaking how Cujo was thinking that he was a bad dog. I just felt so bad. And that's another thing I think Stephen King does very well. Even though Cujo was meant to be the villain of the book, I really felt for him. I felt so bad because also it was just a matter of circumstance that all these things happened to Cujo. And I thought it was heartbreaking. I thought he wrote Cujo so well because he acted just as a dog. I've got a dog. I know my dog would have done exactly the same thing. If he'd have seen a rabbit in a field, it'd have been gone after it.
Well, that's a really interesting point too. I think like Cujo, when I first was starting to read the book, I assumed Cujo was the villain. And as I got to the end of the book, I realized, and again, non-spoiler, but it's Rabies was the villain, quote unquote, It was like this particular seemingly like just accidental random occurrence ended up setting off a chain of events that affected the lives of so many beings, people and animals. And so it's like, I think that's an interesting idea, is he was a good dog turned by rabies, like that's one thing that it really explores, is this is not just like he was destined to be evil or this and that. It is just a random accident, and what could happen if the right
it was a freak occurrence.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's just a phenomenal way of thinking about it, to exploring like the depth of fear is like the things that happen, that are, tragedies in life. It's like how much of that is a seemingly random sequence of events that were arranged in a particular way, that's like, oh, if only this thing didn't happen, or oh, if only, it wasn't so hot outside, or if only that, the Donna didn't bring her car to that one place, it's like that kind of a thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And
just like choosing between one mechanic or another
mhm,
was like just became such a huge decision. One person not answering a phone call
yeah,
became huge, and it's like a real almost like butterfly effect type thing. How like, and it just one thing happens and it just snowballs and goes on and on and on until ah, possibly one of the most tragic endings to a book I've ever read. I
100%.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I hear a lot of people talk about like disturbing books, and I've read Gone to See the Riverman, I've read Cows, I've read Tender is the Flesh. I think Cujo is up there because it is extremely disturbing in places, and it does touch on some really, really hard subjects to read about.
Mm.
Like you've got like the toxic relationships, and there's other things that once we get into spoiler territory we can
Yeah.
talk about. But it's a vicious book. As brilliant as it is, it's genuinely vicious at times, and I
Yeah.
honestly think he shows a real mean streak at times, even with some of the humor that's in it.
Yeah.
It's really mean humor.
Yeah.
It's like, can I just read the one bit that springs to mind?
Oh
And I
yeah.
just think this is so mean. Right, where is it? Ever since Arnold Hebert, who had been 101 and so far gone in senility that talking to him held all the intellectual challenge of talking to an empty cat food can, had doddered off the back patio of the Castle Acres nursing home and broken his neck exactly 25 minutes after whizzing in his pants for the last time. That's
Mhm.
just mean, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. He
You
does
know,
those pretty.
it's like not only are you going to break your neck, but you're going to pee your pants as well, and I'm just going to show you up. It's like it's just uncalled for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
He goes for the messy parts of, like, if he's exploring death, or if he's exploring marriages, or if he's exploring anything, it's always the messy parts of it, which
yeah,
is fascinating, because a lot of authors don't go there, and
yeah,
also pretty disturbing at
yeah.
times.
Did you find that in Pet Cemetery as well?
Oh my god, yeah. Oh yeah. That's a
I mean, how he's like kind of like if I remember correctly, how
Mhm.
he's like kind of wishing it was the other one that it happened to.
Right,
And it's
right,
like,
right.
good grief.
It's
But
brutal.
he goes, yeah.
But it
I
explores
mean,
it to that point, and I think this applies to really both books, but is it's about also the irrational thoughts that we don't want to admit to ourselves that people have. Thoughts happen, and they may come into your mind, and you dismiss them as like, no, that's irrational, or you push it away.
yeah,
He doesn't push it away, he spotlights them. And in a way, it's kind of amazing, because even though we don't want to admit it to ourselves, these irrational thoughts will enter our mind, especially when we're dealing with strong emotions like grief, or you know
yeah,
um or in the case of Cujo, like loneliness, or feelings of life has passed you by. You're going to have thoughts that come, that the darkest parts of ourselves that we don't want to admit we have, and then he spotlights them, so it's
yeah,
uncomfortable but also brilliant.
yeah. And he does it so well. And I think his books give us a safe way to explore these dark thoughts because we
Mhm.
can always just put the bookmark in, put it to the side. It's a safe way for us to explore these dark feelings and these dark emotions.
Yeah.
And he just does it so well. And he never does it in a way that feels as graphic as he can be and as dark as he can be, it never feels gratuitous. It never
Right.
feels over the top. It always feels that it's been done for the sake of the story and to further his telling of the story.
Mm-hmm.
There are parts where you go, oh, that's nasty.
Yeah.
But you never think, oh, you've took that too far. Because
Right.
it's always done. Tasteful isn't the right word, is it? But he always he always does it in a way where you don't like some horror authors. You read it and you feel a bit dirty reading it. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I need to go and have a wash after reading that. Never feel that with Stephen King.
Yeah.
He's classy vicious.
Yeah.
That's how I say it. He's classy vicious.
Well, to that point, I think it's like everything is in service to the character. I remember reading an interview with Stephen King a while back where he was talking about how he always is character focused first, plot second. So he's like, if you have to rely on plot to move your story forward, you should rethink the story. That was always his kind of mantra, which is an interesting way to think about it. And so all these things that feel, messy or kind of disturbing, if they're in service to the character, it makes it much more believable rather than just being a plot-driven device or something that's shoehorned in to like bring the story to where you want it to go. It's more like, what would the character do in this situation? What would the character feel? And then that guides the story. And that's why I think like that makes books like Cujo so compelling.
Yeah. And even in his more supernatural type books,
Mm-hmm.
I never feel that I've got to have a suspension of disbelief with him. Everything that he writes, you think, oh, this is so real. It's like intergalactic space tortoise clown living in the sewers. Yeah, totally buy into that. I'm cool with that.
Couldn't have described it better myself. That's perfect.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
no.
When I read it, at no point did I ever think, oh, that's so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
I bought into everything he wrote in that book.
Yep.
And I think that is a special talent. There's not many authors that can do that. Like, I've read some Dean Koontz,
Mm-hmm.
and there's times when I read something and there's eye rolling happening. I'm like, good grief. I can't believe you went there. Never get that with Stephen King. And I think that is just a credit to his talent as a writer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Should we get into maybe some spoilers now? And maybe
yes.
So for anyone who's watching right now, we're going to get into some spoiler territory. If you haven't read it and you don't mind being spoiled and are along for the ride, please feel free to continue watching. And if you don't want to be spoiled, then just letting you know now, so you all can be prepared. But I guess getting right into it. I think like Donna and was it what was her husband's name again?
Vic Trenton.
Right, Vic Trenton. That's right. And so their marriage dynamic was very interesting because the book immediately explores Donna's infidelity. And I just thought that was such a bold choice to make because, for main characters like that, you kind of don't want to necessarily make them quote unquote unlikable, from the outset. And I thought that was a very interesting choice. But because there was an irrational, but to her mind, rational reason for why, she was being unfaithful and this and that. You're seeing it from her POV, and you can accept, even if you don't understand, you can accept that she's making this choice deliberately or whatever.
Yeah, it was such a brave decision to make a character who really, I mean, she's horrid things happen to her. So for her to have done something inherently unlikable, when as a character you want to like her and root for her, it was a really brave story choice.
Yeah.
And like you say, even though you probably don't agree with what she did, because you can see her reasoning behind it, you understand why she did it. And then but the person she did it with, what a scumbag.
The worst.
Oh, he was such a horrid person. And why couldn't Cujo get him?
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's always fun that you want, you know, you would want the dog to attack, or like,
Yeah,
he's done this in other books too, where he has this like extremely unlikable character, and somehow sometimes will dodge the situation at hand and stuff.
yeah. Oh, it's
Brutal, brutal.
Steve Camp was just so unlikable.
Yeah,
He was such a sleazy, horrid, arrogant individual, and I absolutely despised him from the first page he was on.
yep,
And
yep.
I was so happy when he got arrested.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. And it felt like you just kept hoping that something would happen to him sooner, and he just kept getting away with more and more.
Yeah.
There's a point in the book where, and again, this is something Stephen King does so well. There's a point in the book where Steve Kemp mails a letter to Donna's husband, basically insinuating that he's been with his wife. And it is just so messed up the way he does it. And then, you know, like the audience who's reading the book knows that he sent this letter, but Donna and Vic don't know yet. And so you're waiting for that shoe to drop. And, you know, you see the letter arrive in the mail, and it's like all the mic that leads to the
horrible, isn't it?
Horrible. And you feel like you're watching like a train wreck in slow motion, but you can't look away because writing is so compelling. And so stuff like that.
But I thought that was an interesting plot point as well, because that also, it made me really feel for Vic, and it made me really like Vic. And I think it was a very good way of Stephen King saying, right, I want you to hate this guy, but I want you to be rooting for this guy. And I think that one plot device completely achieved that, because from that point onwards, everything that Vic did, I wanted him to succeed in, because he goes on a trip with his friends to try and save their failing advertising business. I wanted him to win that contract back. I wanted him to succeed in everything. And it all stemmed from him receiving that one horrific letter from Steve Camp. And it's a lot of clever things. And I feel manipulated at times by Stephen King, because he has a way of letting you know you should really be rooting for this guy, but that guy, he's terrible. Don't root for him.
Right.
And he definitely did it in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you bring up a really good point. Is like Vic, it was interesting because he gets this letter and you get to see everything from his immediate emotion. You know, you get to see exactly how he would react in this from the second he opens it. He's trying to read it. He's like not comprehending at first. Like, he's like, wait a minute. And you see the kind of like the wheels turning. You actually see it in real time as he's experiencing it.
And that was a very hard part of the book, because it's so emotional, and it was hard to read, because you just, I assume you felt the same. I just felt so bad for him.
Oh yeah.
And you kind of think, how would I feel in that situation? And it's just heartbreaking what he goes through, like from that point. And the rest of the book, how he deals with it and doesn't completely shut down. I don't know how, but it just goes to show his strength as a character, I think, which is why I'm looking forward to reading when I get to You Like It Darker, because I've heard that is it Rattlesnake?
I think so. Yeah, that's the sequel.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I still haven't read that yet either. So
yeah, I want to get to that soon. So just so I can read that follow up to Cujo.
Totally. Well, you know, it's interesting because it's you know, Donna cheats on Vic with Steve Kemp, and you would think that would be the kind of final nail in the coffin of the way the reader feels about Donna. And yet Stephen King still makes her a sympathetic character, as
Yeah,
the on, and you're still kind of rooting for her and Vic to patch things up. You're still rooting
yeah,
for come back from his trip in enough time to save the day when, kind of moving the plot along, I guess, when
yeah,
Doc and Tad, her son, and her and Vic's son, they go on a car ride to take the car to the shop where um, the family that owns Cujo, they own a mechanic shop, and so she takes it up the road and the car stalls, and at that point you're you're hoping that nothing happens to them, and you're really rooting for them to make it out, and you're really rooting for Vic to come and save the day, even after it starts with this like shattering of the marriage dynamic.
yeah. And I think the way that King makes Donna likable is by showing her utter devotion to her son Tad.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, she's done this horrible thing to her husband, but she is still very, very devoted to her son, and she will do anything to protect him. And I
Yeah.
think that is how he brings you back around to rooting for Donna, because he's like, yeah, she's done this terrible thing, but I showed you why she did it and her thinking of it. But she is a good person because she's doing the right thing she's trying to do the right thing by her son. And God, they go through some stuff, don't they? When they
Oh,
get to that garage.
yeah, it's interesting also. It's like there's so many things. We kind of touched upon this before in the non-spoiler section, but there were so many things that could have been changed. It's like if what's his name? The guy who owns the mechanic shop.
Joe Camber.
That's right, Joe Camber. Joe Camber's wife, if she didn't win, what was it, $5,000 or something?
Yeah, the
In,
luckiest day of her life.
yeah,
She wins the lottery, and it's absolutely life changing for her in a good way, and it gives her hope because she starts hoping that her son can become a better man than her husband, and it gives her real hope for the future. But that one piece of good fortune for her just snowballs into terrible fortune for Donna.
yeah.
And it's the way he links these little events in the book. It's just how he did that without planning it. I don't know how he just wrote it.
Oh,
It's unreal.
well, it's interesting. Yeah, it's like Joe Camber's wife. She wins this lottery. She takes her son to visit her sister, I think it was, if I
Yeah,
remember. And
yeah,
and you see her wheels turning of like, this is my chance to escape my oppressive husband, and maybe I
yeah,
don't have to come back. This
yeah.
is
And Joe Camber's a piece of work as well, isn't he?
yeah.
He puts hands on his wife, and he's pretty despicable as well. To be fair, I wasn't upset when he met Cujo.
Right, yeah. Well, that
Yeah,
was an interesting thing. Also, I know I'm kind of jumping around here, but one thing that I found interesting about Cujo was he's a good dog who's afflicted by rabies. But that idea also plays into Donna's irrational fears, because when they first meet Cujo, she's worried because he's like a big dog. He kind of like starts licking Tad and like is kind of
yeah,
just affectionate. But it just feels a little bit like, whoa, like Tad is a small boy. This big dog is coming, and you feel that irrational fear planted then. And then when Cujo is like, they're trapped in the car, Donna and her son Tad, it's sweltering heat outside, no AC, and it's like the dog is attacking the car. It's a massive dog,
yeah,
and she like makes eye contact with the dog, and she knows in her heart, like she knows in her mind intellectually, that this dog is afflicted with rabies. She can tell. He's foaming at the mouth. He looked. It's a classic case of a dog who has rabies. However, the darker part of her mind wants, like, kind of is fighting against that, saying, I feel like I can see a sentient evil in this dog, that's staring at me,
yeah,
that knows what it's doing, and it is like ready to strike. And so it's the two parts of her mind that are playing against each other, like the mind playing tricks on you kind of a thing. And that's like
Yeah,
component is what makes the book so compelling. I think it's not just the dog attack stories, it's like
yeah,
psychological component. Yeah.
yeah. But and what he does so well also is he writes it, as you say, like the psychological components of the story. But then when Cujo does mount an attack on Donna and Tad in the car, it's done with such ferocity and just such feral violence. It's absolutely shocking. And there's a part when Cujo does actually get the better of Donna and tricks her into thinking he's not there. And she gets out of the car and Cujo gets hold of her and he starts ripping into her guts and tearing at her legs. And then not only has Donna got the fear of, how do I get away from this dog that's trying to kill me? And then she goes, I've got to protect Tad. And then she goes, oh, I've got rabies now as well. So I need to get to the hospital. So everything is against her. Like, how long can she last in this hot car over 100 degrees without water or food? How long can she last before she gets treatment for her rabies? How long can she last from the blood loss? And it's a constant ticking clock of things that are going against her. And it's, it must be such, how he writes it, it's so tense how he writes her emotions while she's in this car trying to find a way of protecting her and her son. And against this, and as you explained earlier, she starts thinking it's like her mortal enemy in Cujo, when in Cujo's head he's like, am I a good dog or am I a bad dog? It's heartbreaking.
It is 100%. Yeah. And, you know, I feel just so bad for Tad as well, who's this little kid who has to experience this traumatic event and see this dog attacking his mom, you know, and then be in this car and like, and it's interesting because even the way that whole setup happens is kind of crazy. Like, Donna wasn't originally going to take her car to Joe's garage.
Yeah.
Then ends up deciding to. Tad, she was just going to go alone. And Tad, like, insists getting in the car with her.
Tad didn't want the babysitter to come round.
Right.
So if he'd have been okay with the babysitter, he wouldn't have even been there. Which goes back to little circumstances snowballing into huge life-changing circumstances.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also loved, you know, kind of going back to what you were talking about, the ticking of the clock, John. One thing I really, one little subplot point, what I really appreciated was when you're, you know, when you're seeing kind of the nexus of these different events of who's going to save Donna, who's going to save Tad. And it's like, Vic is at this meeting and he was going to come back at some point. When will he come back? The mailman is supposed to come by at some point. Will he come by? And then, you know, and she's like waiting for this mailman. And then the mailman realizes, oh, like the flag is like down or up. I forget which one it is. And so he's like, oh, I guess come to the house.
Don't need to go there today. Yeah.
Like,
time is quite an important theme as well in the story, I feel. Time seems to be quite an important, especially in the second half of the book. Time becomes very, very important to a lot of characters. You know, it's like, how long will it be before Cujo goes truly rabid? How long will Donna have to wait until someone comes home? And yeah, there's so many little sub stories in the book. It's for a book that, I mean, most people, if you say Cujo, they just think, oh, dog attack story.
Right. Yeah.
There's so many little intricate plot points. It's so much. It works as just an animal attack, but it's so much more as well.
100%. I think the animal attack aspect is like, if you see a movie trailer, it's like the highlight reel, you know. And then the movie, maybe, you know, that's just to get people's attention and get them to go see the movie. It's not actual story of what it's about. And it's interesting, what you mentioned, John, because like, it packs all of that in like what, 280, 300 pages. It's like
Yeah, it's not a long book.
yeah, it's one of his smallest books, and somehow he explores all of this in this one novel. It's just
Yeah,
fascinating to me. I think it's just perfectly paced. That was one thing I felt about that book, was there was nothing that felt out of place. Nothing felt like it dragged.
yeah.
It
Everything that was there felt like it needed to be there.
yeah. It's just masterpiece for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
I imagine also because John, you read it before, right? You read it once before.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
it
many
was
years ago.
Okay, yeah. I was gonna say is like I would imagine, because this was my first time reading it. But I would just imagine if I was like younger reading it, I would probably focus more on the dog attack story than any of the nuance.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
and the thing I love about Stephen King too, I think that's very much the case with Cujo, is you can reread it. I did this with Pet Cemetery, and I felt the same way. Is like you can reread his books at different stages in your life, and different aspects of the book take on more nuanced meaning because you can project your own experiences onto what you're reading. And so for the
yeah,
Cujo, the dog attack horror aspect of it, the supernatural, monsters in the closet aspect of it, that would appeal to younger readers for sure. It's like the teenagers who are getting into
yeah,
Stephen kind of thing. And
yeah,
then the marriage dynamics, that stuff appeals to maybe more adults who either have experienced it or understand from a like a kind of an intellectual point of view what that dynamic might feel like, or explore
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I read it when I was about 19, 20,
Okay.
and it was very much the Cujo attacking. That was the parts that I remember and
Yeah.
that I enjoyed when I read it. But when I reread it earlier this year with you, it was definitely the human aspects that I found the most interesting in the book. I mean, the Cujo attack parts, they're brilliant. The whole book is brilliant, but you get so much more out. I got so much more out of it on the reread than I did on the original read through.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I actually felt the same about Pet Cemetery when I read it. I remember just being blown away when I read it. I was 14 when I read it, and I read it again about a year ago. And so some of the other aspects of like, I don't have kids myself, but I could imagine what that might feel like being a father, and you're looking at it from a different vantage point compared to when you're a kid. And I would imagine the same would be true for Cujo. So
Yeah,
it's definitely the magic of his works, is there's so much depth and dimension that you can experience it and re-experience it, and you're going to get a different experience each time. So it's
yeah.
just wonderful. And that ending,
Oh,
brutal. I mean, just really, it was sad. I felt really sad
yeah,
after. I felt very fulfilled, if that makes sense.
yeah.
It was like,
I mean,
yeah,
it was a brilliant ending, and I think it was the right ending for the book.
mm,
But it's just heartbreaking in so many ways
yeah,
because after 3 days of surviving and being in this car, being attacked by Cujo, the young boy Tad passes away,
mm-hmm.
and at the end, Cujo also succumbs to rabies and everything, and even to the very end, Cujo's thinking, "Oh, I'm such a bad dog," and he feels terrible because he knows he's a good dog, but he's doing bad dog things.
Yeah.
But yeah, when Tad died and Vic gets there just too late to save them,
Yeah.
and that's absolutely heartbreaking.
Brutal.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but one of the things I found quite interesting was Donna and Tad were in this car and they hadn't had any water, so they were severely dehydrated. And one of the symptoms of severe hydration is you can hallucinate. And when Vic finds Donna and Tad, and he finds Donna out of the car, and he goes to the car and finds Tad dead, he says, "How long has he been like this?"
Yeah.
So I'd love to know if Donna was hallucinating, if Tad, I'd love to know when he actually died.
Yeah.
Because Donna becomes quite an unreliable narrator towards the end of the book.
With the heat exhaust, fatigue, and dehydration, and then from a rabid dog, like the rest, or
because what got me thinking on that was, if Tad had only just passed, Vic would possibly know that that had been quite recent. But for him to say, "How long has he been like this?" makes me wonder that maybe Tad didn't make it as long as what the story leads you to believe. I could be reading too much into it. Who knows?
And I think that was a brilliant, piece of dialogue there that Stephen King, interjected at that point. I wanted to
just one line. Oh, what was that? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just looking at the comments right now. I saw Drew Welty wrote something really great. I just wanted to read it here. It said, "I went into Cujo expecting a story about an animal, and I got a story about relationship conflict, family stress, and tragic loss, not just for the family, but also for the poor puppy." It's like, that's just a way to describe it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I felt the same, because even after Cujo, I mean, I think is it four people he kills, something like that, Cujo, something like that. Even at the end, I felt bad for Cujo because he didn't want any of this. I was heartbroken by the end of this book. It absolutely broke me.
Totally.
But like, not just because of Cujo, but the human aspect as well. There's just so much tragedy, and it happens, and it could have been so easily avoided. I think that's what makes it more tragic. That just the tiniest thing would have stopped all of the events from happening. Phenomenal book.
It's interesting also, is when the final confrontation between Donna and Cujo happens at the end of the book. Even at that point, when you want this madness to end, when you want the horrific events to stop, you don't want Cujo to experience pain. You don't want to see him die. You just want to see this stop. And that's even at that point, he makes you sympathize with everyone, including Cujo. Like, I think that's a brilliant way that he's
like, even when Cujo's really far gone and he's been attacking the car for days, it's the part where he like rams the door, and Donna says that she can see like the dent in Cujo's skull. I felt so bad for him.
Oh yeah,
poor dog. But it's what they all go through is just horrific. But it's a brutal book. It's absolutely vicious.
Totally. Yeah. 100%. And I was reading this kind of in chunks as I was taking my vacation to the UK, and I just I had to go on a long walk after I finished the book and just be by myself and just kind of think about the events that transpired. I think it really process things, but it also feels like, man, I can't wait to reread this. Somehow I felt like I didn't feel.
I read it and I felt so heartbroken by it. I went straight into a children's novel after I started reading The Never-Ending Story.
Oh, nice! So that's great. Yeah.
I was like, I can't do another horror straight after that.
I think I read Ken Follett's Century trilogy after that, and it was maybe not the best thing I could have done, because Winter of the World was like a World War II book, so I didn't get a chance to read anything lighthearted after Cujo. I probably should have. But.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Talking about Cujo, I've got a question for you, and
Yeah.
this will go into your music as well.
Totally.
I
Yeah.
don't know how Hollywood things work, but Mike Flanagan's PA contacts you and says that he's remaking Cujo, and he would like you to score one scene from the book. Which scene do you choose?
Oh, you know, that's tough. That's a really, so my first instinct might be, oh, you know, the car scene when they're trapped in the
Yeah,
car and Cujo first attacks Donna or something. That could be interesting. Another thought could be the ending when Vic goes up to Donna and says, "How long has he been dead?" You know, but
yeah,
I think what could be really interesting to explore is actually Cujo going into the into the little hollow to chase after the rabbit. That whole rabbit chase sequence and getting bit by the rabbit bat, right?
yeah,
That could be really interesting to explore because you're seeing Cujo before he becomes Cujo. You know, he's just a dog who's doing dog things, and
yeah.
that's
You could be. It could be quite jolly music, couldn't it? And then it could go quite dark all of a sudden.
wait. It could be. I could imagine it actually being played. Even you know, I think that could be an obvious choice to do that to kind of juxtaposition.
Yeah,
I think it could be interesting to have like a Cujo's theme. You know, if there was a few set like a melody or a few sets of notes or even a sound that feels like a Cujo sound, and it morphs as the film progresses. So during this part, it feels like the regular dog, and then it starts to get
yeah,
morphs when he becomes rabid. That could be an interesting through line. So you're not only seeing the juxtaposition of the two, but you're also seeing that it's the same dog. That could be an
yeah.
interesting.
That's really interesting. I've got to admit, one scene. I think my favorite scene from the entire book was when Joe's son went outside looking for Cujo in the fog, and then he sees Cujo emerging from the fog, and he can tell that Cujo's ill.
Yeah,
And then Cujo like backs off into the fog, and he decides not to follow him. That I just thought that scene was so atmospheric, and it was so well written, and I just got the idea that maybe there's that good dog still in Cujo. You just got the feeling was, well, Cujo didn't attack his favorite human,
yeah.
so maybe he is a good dog. I just thought that was a powerful, powerful moment in the book, and yeah, that's my favorite part in the book, I think.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's a fantastic. You know, I'm really glad you brought that up too, because it's like that helps to paint the picture that this is not just. It's not black and white. You know, it's not like a good dog turning into
Yeah,
a dog. It is a good dog slowly being kind of possessed by this illness, but there's still
yeah,
the dog in there. It's not like
yeah,
that. It's like there's still he still wants to be a good dog all the way to the very end. You know.
yeah. But yeah, heartbreaking book, fantastic book. If you haven't read it, read it. It's amazing.
Absolutely, yeah, and it packs a punch in like 300 pages. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
um,
yeah. You'll get through it in a weekend, and you'll be happy. Well, you won't be happy you've read it, but you'll be glad you've read it.
you might need a week to process or something. I know I did. So
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot to unpack in that book for such a short book.
totally, as is evidenced by our hour-long live stream here.
Yeah, we've been flapping our gums for quite a while, haven't we?
Absolutely. So I guess with that, unless you have any last thoughts about it, John.
I think we've covered it pretty well. I can't think of anything else.
Yeah, no, it's just great to have you on the channel. It's great to do this inaugural live stream. I'm so looking forward to
Yeah,
many chats with you down the line, John. And
yeah. Thank you for inviting me onto your channel.
absolutely, I'm so glad that we got a chance to connect through this community and
Yeah,
get to
it's
talk about
been
books.
brilliant.
We got some more read-alongs planned to you all who are joining us here, and so thank you so much all for watching this kind of inaugural live stream on the channel. Will be the first of many, And it's been great getting to chat with you on the chat here as well a little bit. And so really appreciate you all chiming in. And again, I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. And
I'm John at Disquiet and Dragons.
And definitely check out John's channel if you haven't. Just a fantastic channel. I just really love the way he talks about books, and just a lovely guy. And so really great chatting with you, John. Thanks for being on the channel.
And you.
We'll be seeing you very shortly. All right, everybody. You take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Be good to yourselves and be good to each other. And we'll see you very soon.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye all.